Amanda, thank you so much for agreeing to come onto the podcast. I'm excited to have you here. I've never had anyone share their birth story from Canada before.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. I'm a huge fan of you and your podcast, so it just feels like a dream come true to get to be here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. So we live in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. If you don't know where that is, it's in the middle of the Canadian prairies. It's a big city for where we are, but probably a small city compared to what a lot of your listeners will be living in. It's myself, my husband, Brandon, and our 10-month-old Jameson. So It's just the three of us here. Yeah.
Awesome. 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 Is it warm there, cold there? Like, what's the weather like there?
Well, today's very rainy. Normally summer is pretty warm, but we get all four seasons. We get a really cold winter, a really slushy spring, nice summer, and then into like a really short fall, and then winter again.
Gotcha. All right. So in order to understand the birth, we have to understand a bit about what the pregnancy was like. So what was your pregnancy like and your prenatal care like? I'm really curious what prenatal care is like in Canada and if it's any different.
Yeah, so I don't totally know how it works in the States, but for me, I just started with my GP, is what we call them here, the general practitioner. So my family doctor. She cared for me up to 28 weeks of pregnancy. A lot of GPs here have what's called a +1, so they can do labor and delivery. Mine doesn't do that. So she referred me to an OB when I was 28 weeks is when we started under the OB's care. And then that's who took care of us for the latter part of my pregnancy.
Okay. And was it the same OB that you saw the whole time? Okay. And then do you have a choice as to who you see, or do you get sent to a specific person?
Yeah, so we had a choice, but how it works is you can't just book in, you have to get a referral. And so we requested a referral to a specific OB. She didn't take us. Most of the OBs here will only take high risk pregnancies, and I wasn't.
Got it.
Thankfully, my practitioner had a relationship with the OB that we ended up getting with. So she took us even though she normally wouldn't. So we got pretty lucky here.
Gotcha. Yeah. So then who do the low risk people mostly go to?
Yeah, they're GPs, they're practitioners, they're family doctors.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. All right. And then did you have any problems or issues during your pregnancy?
Not really. I was quite nauseous the whole time. I ended up on expectant, which worked wonders for me. I know it doesn't for everybody, unfortunately. But then once we did get into the OB's care, she did an extra scan, which normally wouldn't happen here. We get one at 8 weeks for dating, and then one at 20 weeks for the anatomy scan. And that's normally it, unless you have any concerns.
Sure.
But she just wanted a scan because she does it in her office. Normally we would have to get a referral to go to the clinic, but she could do it right there. And so she wanted to just take a look. So she had a more up-to-date picture of what was going on. And baby was measuring very large. This was at 35 weeks that she took a look. And baby was measuring 40 plus weeks already. So she said, I want to take another look in a couple weeks, see how fast he's growing in there. So he ended up being expected to be quite large. I think at 38 weeks, he was measuring 9 pounds already. So that's when we kind of started talking induction, was at that point.
Okay. All right. And then I guess we'll save it to see what he ended up weighing at the birth. So then how did you feel about the care you received?
I was really happy. I had a great pre-established relationship with my family doctor. She's been my doctor since I was probably 7 or 8 years old. So she knows me really well. Yeah. So she was phenomenal. She knows I'm quite high anxiety and she knows that. And so she just took really good care of me. And then when we got to our OB, she was also so phenomenal. She took really, really good care of us. We were so happy with the care we received from them during pregnancy and while we were in hospital. All the care providers we had were amazing, which was great.
Oh, good. Good. And did you have to travel a long distance for any of your care?
No. So like I said, our city's not super big. The farthest appointment we had, I think, was a 15-minute drive. And that was downtown. We live in, I guess, what would be kind of a little suburb. And the hospital is a 7-minute drive. So nothing was ever very far.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So what did you do to prepare for your birth?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm a little bit high anxiety. So I like a lot any control. But in pregnancy and birth, you don't really have any. So I over prepared in a way to kind of grasp at any sort of control that I could have. So I listened to your podcast a lot. I listened to Mubby Labor Nurse. I don't know if you know her. She has Instagram. I listened to her content. I subscribed to her emails. Dr. Sterling, OBGYN, was another
Uh-huh.
one. I listened
Yeah.
to a lot of hers. There's a local podcast here called Mooney Birthy Stories. I listened to that a lot because it was more
Okay.
specific to Canada births.
Sure.
And then I did a hypnobirthing course through the Positive Birth Company, I think is what it was.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Were you
yeah.
planning for an unmedicated birth?
The hope, and someone, I think it was maybe mommy labor nurse who said, try to have preferences, not a plan.
Sure.
And so I went in with the preference being I wanted to try to go unmedicated. But I was open to, if I was really exhausted or overwhelmed, I would get the epidural. So we tried to be more open. But in my mind, if everything went the way I was hoping it would go, it would be an unmedicated vaginal birth.
Gotcha. Okay. What are some other things that maybe you wanted for your birth?
Yeah. So we wanted the compress to help prevent tearing. We wanted to be able to be upright and walking around throughout the birth, not kind of stuck to the bed on the monitors. And we were just hoping that labor would happen spontaneously. So those were all our hopes.
Gotcha. Now, are doulas in Canada? Like, how are doulas in Canada?
Yeah, so there are doulas. I wouldn't say there's a ton where we are. They are out-of-pocket expenses. Whereas all the other care, midwives included, are covered under our provincial health plan. So we did not have a doula because it just wasn't in our budget.
Sure.
We did apply for the midwifery program. We weren't able to get accepted. It's very, very hard to get in because there's so few midwives that work in our area. So that's why we went with our OB care.
Gotcha. So you have to apply for to see a midwife?
Yeah, okay. And I applied the day I found out I was pregnant.
Wow.
And we were too late. They were full for the month of September, which is when I gave birth.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And I presume, obviously, you can't apply before you're pregnant. So.
No, because you have to know your due date. Your due date, roughly. Right. So
okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. And then all of your care is paid for.
Yep.
So you don't pay anything out of pocket at all.
No, we paid. I think we had to pay $100 for my son's birth certificate after he was born, but that was the only out-of-pocket expense that we paid.
Okay. Do you pay health insurance premiums at all or anything? Or
no. So for things like for something like chiropractor, physio, things like that, my employer pays that, and I have that through work. But for anything like this, no, it's all just. I'd probably in taxes. I don't really know the logistics of it, but there's nothing that we have to go set up or anything.
Okay. So you just go make an appointment and that's it?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Look, that does not happen in the United States.
Yeah. From what I've heard, it's quite different.
Yes, definitely different. All right. So was there anything that you were afraid of about giving birth?
Yeah, everything. My biggest fear was that I was going to have a cesarean section. My friend the year prior had to have an unplanned one with her daughter, and she had hoped for an unmedicated vaginal birth as well. And it ended up being great. Everyone was healthy and happy and things went well. But the thought of having to lay on an OR table, I have never had any sort of surgical procedure before. I've never been in hospital before. Right. So the whole experience to me seemed really scary because it was so foreign, but especially having to go into an operating room seemed really, really scary. And then I was also very, very scared of the epidural. Since I was a child, the thought of an epidural has just petrified me. I thought I was going to end up paralyzed or dead. And I don't know where this fear came from. No one in my family has ever had an issue with their epidural.
But you just were like...
I just was petrified. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then let's get into what was your labor and birth like?
Yeah, it was absolutely everything I didn't plan. So we ended up getting induced when I was 39 weeks because baby was measuring so big. Our OB was so wonderful. She knew what my hopes were. She was very understanding. She suggested that we get induced, but she was very open to what we were hoping for and what we wanted to do. So we went in when I was 39 weeks. And I remember she just walked into the room and she put her hand on my lap and she said, "How are you doing? What are you thinking?" And I said, "I'm actually ready. Let's do an induction." Because at that point, I was uncomfortable. I was not sleeping. I wanted to meet this baby that was inside of me. And so I don't know when I had the change of heart, but it was like overnight one day, I just was ready to go with the induction. So she tried a sweep that day and nothing happened. So we went in for the induction the next day. So I was 39 and 1.
Okay.
And we started with the Foley catheter. So I was
Okay.
just dilated enough that we could do that. So we went, and the way our hospital works is that once you go there and you have your room, that's your room for your whole stay. So you get induced there, you labor, you deliver, and then you recover there. So it was really nice to just kind of settle into our room.
You stay there the whole time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really nice setup, because we just we unpacked our bags, we put up some Christmas lights, we put out some candles and affirmations, and we just got to settle into our room, which ended up being our room for 5 days. So it was really nice that we kind of had this little home base.
Sure.
So I had the Foley catheter. Once it was in and they did their monitoring and baby and I were okay, we were actually allowed to leave for a few hours. So they wanted us back there to sleep that night, but we were allowed to go out. This was about 2 PM by the time we got it in. So we went to my parents' house, who live really close by, and just had some food, watched some TV. And then I ended up having some contractions. And very unexpectedly, I got very nauseous and sick, which is not normal for me. But in pregnancy, it was somewhat normal for me. So then I just wanted to get back to the hospital. I wanted to be in our hospital room, have a care team there to take care of me. My poor 19-year-old brother was also home, and he just was not okay with what was going on. So I decided we would go back to the hospital.
Gotcha.
And they were great.
Around what time was that?
This was probably at about 4:30.
Okay. Yeah. So you left for a couple hours, and then was like, I'm just gonna head on back. Yeah. Okay.
I just want to go back to the room.
Okay. But wait, you left your stuff in the room, like they were just like, go have dinner, room. Go do whatever, and then come back. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It was really nice.
That is not this doesn't happen in the US. But no, go ahead. So you get back to the room.
Yeah, we got back to our room, and so I just explained to the nurses I wasn't feeling well. They brought me all sorts of goodies, which was lovely. I had so much apple juice and ginger ale and some Gravol, and I started to feel a lot better. Okay. And so we just kind of hung out, and they did their monitoring I can't remember how often they were checking vitals and getting baby on the monitor to make sure he was doing well. And we just hung out kind of for the next night and day in our hospital room.
Okay. So how long did the Foley stay in?
Yeah, it never fell out. So they ended up taking it out when it had been 26 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And then did they do Pitocin during that time?
Yes.
Or
no.
Okay.
After they took it out, they're like, let's start Pitocin now. They were hoping the Foley would work, and it just never really did anything for me. Okay. But I was exhausted. I hadn't slept. The Foley was uncomfortable, and I was contracting while it was in.
Sure.
So I hadn't slept that whole night, and I just asked if I could have a break now that the Foley was out before we started Pitocin, thinking the Pitocin would really kick things into gear.
Right.
So the care team was wonderful. They let me have a little nap, and then we started Pitocin. Okay. And I can't remember the dosage. I think it was 5 mils is what we started at, and then it increased 2 mils every 30 minutes.
Okay. And I'm sorry. So a nap, they were like, oh, just take a little nap. Whenever you wake up, we'll start Pitocin.
They said, I'll give you an hour, is what the nurse said. And so she came back in and checked on me. I was sleeping. My husband was awake, so they talked. And then she gave me another, I think, 45 minutes. And then she came back and I was awake, and we started Pitocin.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So start the Pitocin, and then how did things go from there?
Yeah, so nothing really changed. I was having regular contractions. They weren't doing a lot in terms of dilation. I think I ended up at 4 or 5 centimeters overnight at about 4 a.m. So we started Pitocin probably at 4 p.m. on the Thursday. We had gone in on the Wednesday. And by about 3:45 a.m., they came in and they said, we want to try to break your waters, see if that will get things going. So they did that.
Was that your doctor, or was that?
Yeah, so the way it worked, here when you have an OB, once you go in, you're under the care of whoever's on call.
Got it.
So it was whatever on-call OB was there. And they were all fantastic, which was really nice for us. But it wasn't our personal OB.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so you hadn't met any of the people before?
No.
Okay. Got it.
So that was another source of stress for me, because it was all strangers. Our OB actually wasn't even going to be on call because she was in Ireland. So it was just...
So there was no chance that you were going to see her.
No chance, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so they came in and they broke your water.
Yeah, sorry, I got ahead of myself. They came in, they said, we would like to start breaking your water. And now I think they maybe gave me my epidural they broke my waters and then gave me my epidural. They both happened right back to back, and I don't really remember which happened first, but
gotcha.
Yeah, it was the same doctor and same nurse that did both. So they broke my water and gave me an epidural in kind of the same half hour.
Gotcha. Was it just that did you want an epidural
or did
they? Okay.
I wanted the epidural. I had asked for it about midnight, before my waters were broken. I was contracting. I was exhausted. I wanted to sleep, thinking I would probably be delivering shortly.
Right.
And so I had asked for an epidural. They got too busy. They weren't able to come. And so by the time the anesthetist was able to come, they were in there just breaking my waters, or just about to. I can't remember which happened first.
Got it. So it all happened.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long did you have to wait to get the epidural?
I ended up waiting like 4 hours, and I was stressed.
Okay.
Because they just had a slew of people come in who delivered really quickly, and so they were busy. They were very busy that day.
Sure.
Or that night.
Sure.
But I got it, so it was good.
Okay. Yeah. And it worked well?
It was great. It was just so wonderful compared to all the fears I had built up in my mind.
I was getting ready to say, like, how did you wrap your mind around being terrified of getting it and then going to like, I'm just going to get it? Like, how did you get to that point?
The point of exhaustion that I hit, because at this point we're on our second night and I haven't really slept besides that nap. And I voiced my fears to the nurses and the doctors, and they were so wonderful about it. They ended up giving me some anti-anxiety medication. I can't remember what it was, and it helped massively. And then they walked me through the procedure. They had my husband holding my hands, and they just were so wonderful in helping me manage my fears so that I could get the epidural. And I felt so empowered when I was actually able to get the epidural, and it went fine.
Okay, good. And how you said you were about how dilated at that point?
I think I was about 5 centimeters dilated at that point.
Okay. And then after that, what happened?
So after that, I got to about 6, but I was only 25% effaced, and my cervix was very, very high. So they said, we're going to give you some more time. Unfortunately, you've hit the dose of Pitocin where the nurse couldn't just bump it up. She had to wait for the OB to come back. So we just waited. I think it was about an hour, and they came back and checked me again, and I had swelled down to 4 centimeters. So unfortunately, that was not what they were hoping would happen.
Right.
So that's kind of where we hit our fork in the road. And they said, we can keep trying to get you dilated to go for the vaginal delivery. Here's kind of the risks of doing that. You've had a lot of Pitocin. Here's the risks of continuing on Pitocin, et cetera, et cetera. Or right now you can choose to go for a cesarean birth. And, here's the risks, here's the benefits of going that route.
Right.
And then we just asked for some time to think about it and talk about it between myself and my husband, because we were overwhelmed at that point.
Sure.
And
I was going to say, they gave you?
Yeah. They gave us some time. I think it was maybe 10, 15 minutes. It wasn't a huge chunk of time, but it was enough. And I right away just turned to my husband and said, I think I want to do the cesarean. I don't like the sounds of all these risks that can come with staying on Pitocin. I'm swelling. I'm bleeding. I'm so tired. My body is not handling this very well. And so I was ready to go for the cesarean. Shockingly, I still don't really understand how I went from being so terrified to just being fully comfortable with it.
Right.
My husband was more hesitant. Because I think it's different for him, because it's my body that would have to go through that. He was very worried about me. He knows I was exhausted. Am I thinking clearly? But ultimately he thought, you know what, I think this is what's best. And I
guess plus he knew that you wanted to avoid it. So he was like, is this like really,
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a big 180 for me to do.
Right.
So yeah. But we ended up deciding to go for the cesarean. So I think that ended up being 9:30 in the morning when we made the decision. So then they brought in the team. They all introduced themselves. It was a fresh shift, which was really great. So everyone was chipper and excited. We had a wonderful, wonderful team. We couldn't have had a better team if we handpicked them. And baby was born at 10:18. Like, he was in my arms on the operating table at 10:18. So 48 minutes after we decided to go, we had baby in our arms, which if we had known that at the start, we might have chosen to go that way much sooner.
So then I want to ask, so when you got into the operating room, got on the table, how did you feel?
I was so happy and peaceful and excited, and I
really
never would have expected it. Before we went in, I said, "Can I get another dose of that anxiety medication?" I was speaking to the anesthetist, and he said, "I understand why you want that, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is the birth of your first baby. And you're going to want to be fully alert and fully aware for this moment. And so I'm going to be here for you, and your husband's going to be here for you. And I know you can do it without that medication." And I am so thankful to him for saying that to me, because he was so right. I was just so blissfully overjoyed and excited. And I remember every moment of them, because we had the clear drape, which was also just amazing.
Okay.
And so we were able to see him. They held him up to us. And then my husband got to go cut the umbilical cord, which is also amazing.
Right.
He needed a little bit of stimulation for breathing, and then they brought him to me, and we just got to snuggle while they did their business down there.
Right.
And then I remember it all, and I'm so thankful to that anesthesiologist for suggesting to me that I try to do it without any sort of anxiety medication.
Gotcha. And then, do you remember, like, was the feeling or the sensation during the C-section any issues or anything like that?
There was no issues. Thankfully, that friend of mine had mentioned she felt all this like pushing and tugging, not pain, but just the pressure. So I had remembered that, because she remembered being really spooked by that. She wasn't expecting it. And so I just expected it. It felt normal. He was very, very high up and really wedged in. So they had to do a lot of pushing.
Got it.
He had very broad shoulders, we found out. And so there was quite a bit of pushing and tugging, and they eventually got him to come out.
Gotcha.
But it wasn't unexpected. And I was just so giddy with excitement that I didn't care. We were talking, I was talking to my husband and an anesthesiologist, and it was just amazing. It was so amazing. I can't even describe how unexpectedly wonderful that experience was.
Oh my goodness. And then, it's a weird sensation because you know something's happening, but it's like, what's going on?
Exactly.
So then, of course, the big question is, how much did he weigh?
He was 9 pounds, 6 ounces. So nothing outrageous. But big enough. The thing with him was how broad his shoulders were. So he was 9 pounds, 6 ounces, but I think he was only 19-20 centimeters long. Very broad
he was
shoulders.
Just like solid.
Yeah, like he was a very solid dude. And so when they pulled him out, they actually thought he was going to be macrosomic, like over 10 pounds. They were guessing 13. But yeah, it was just it was the broadness of him that really threw everyone off in terms of his size.
Gotcha.
And thankfully, they said we absolutely made the right decision. It would have been a pretty nasty shoulder dystocia if I had kept trying to go with a vaginal delivery, the way he was wedged in there and so broad.
Gotcha.
So that was a really big relief for us to hear and get that affirmation from the surgeon and the doctors that were there.
Gotcha. And was the surgeon the OB, whoever was there that day?
No, she was some new OB we had never met. She came in just to start her shift that day. Just before we had decided, I texted my mom, and she said, "Oh, she's fantastic. Maybe she'll get to do your delivery for you." And I just remember being like, "Oh, that's awesome." We were Googling her, and she seemed so wonderful. So it worked out really nicely that she ended up being the surgeon who did the cesarean, because she is very, very wonderful.
Okay. Awesome. So is that pretty routine in the hospitals, that it's just the OB, whatever OB is there?
Yeah. So unless it's a scheduled cesarean, it's just whatever OB is on call.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. All right.
Yeah.
So then what was your recovery like from the C-section?
Yeah. So obviously completely unexpected. I had expected a vaginal birth. We didn't really prepare. And we live in a 2-story. So the stairs were really tough for me.
Okay.
But I mostly just kind of camped out in our bedroom with our baby. And my husband did the going up and down the stairs. And it was honestly fine. I didn't really realize you also continue to bleed after a cesarean birth. So that, and I had to really be on top of my pain meds and the gas X meds, which was very important.
Yeah, the gas is almost worse than the pain. It's like, why is this happening? Yeah, it can be really challenging. Yeah.
So
and how long? Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, how long do you stay in the hospital after you have a cesarean?
Yeah, so they keep you for 48 hours.
And you were still in the same room. You were still in the same.
Yeah.
Okay. This
Yeah.
is just interesting to
Yeah.
me. So
Besides, I mean, the OR, and then
yeah,
they wheeled me
yeah,
back to
yeah,
the room
yeah,
after the
yeah,
OR. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. 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 So you
Yeah.
stay for 48 hours afterwards, you said?
After the cesarean. Yeah.
Okay. Is that typical?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. So then you got home, got situated. Were you going to say something else? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut. I'm
I
just so
don't, it's
fascinated
okay.
by the
No, yeah,
differences in the
absolutely.
way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't, it wasn't important because it slipped my mind.
Okay. All right. All right. So then did you breastfeed?
I did. Yeah. So as soon as we got into the recovery room, he latched and breastfed like a champ. I had also harvested colostrum ahead of time and brought it with us. So they brought that down because he was big. They were a little bit worried about his sugar levels.
Uh-huh.
So we supplemented him with my colostrum.
Okay.
And that went great. And then, yeah, he fed like a champ and still breastfeeds like a champ today.
Okay.
So,
okay. Do you have lactation counselors? Is that part of the care
we
that you
do.
get?
Yeah. So they come check on you once. I asked her to come back just because I really wanted to make sure things were okay. And yeah, she said, it seems great. He seems great. There's what's called the Breastfeeding Cafe. It's a free resource that moms and babies can go to, hosted by lactation consultants in our city. So you can go to that after you're discharged from the hospital. We never ended up having to go, but it was nice to have that contact information and know that I could if we ever had issues.
Gotcha. Okay. And then did you have any issues with postpartum blues or postpartum depression?
I ended up so the first 2 weeks, and the nurse kind of warned us that those first 2 weeks are going to be quite intense. I think I cried every day at 5:30 on the dot. And then there was never any really a reason. Right. It just was my time to emotionally let go, I guess. Yeah. And then right at the 2-week mark, I started to feel a little bit better. But for me, it was really crippling anxiety, which wasn't a surprise because of how anxious I was before a baby. But I just, and especially with regards to his health, it was fall, flu season was starting, RSV season was starting. And I was so anxious about his well-being. And it's this little newborn that can't tell us how he's feeling. And we've never had one before. So I ended up talking to my GP and we got on an anti-anxiety medication and that helped massively.
Okay. All right. And then does your GP also see your baby or do you have a separate pediatrician?
No, so I think you can get referred to a pediatrician. A pediatrician did check on him in the hospital, was at the birth, etc. But then he's just been under my GP's care now since he was born.
Wow. Okay, so that's really nice because your GP knows you, your GP knows your baby. And
so every appointment is me and him. My husband also came to them as well. And so she would check on him, do whatever she needed with him, and then check on me physically and mentally, which was great.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what kind of postpartum mental health resources are available? Like, are there therapists or counselors or things like that?
Yeah, so I guess I can only speak to my personal experience. The therapists that I go to aren't covered under our provincial health plan, so I have to go under my work health plan. So it's separate. I think there are certain services that you can go through, but it's a lot longer of a wait. You probably have to go through it and things like that. So I just booked in with a private company and then use my private insurance for that.
Okay. All right. And how long is your maternity leave?
Yeah, so I'm doing 13 months, which is a little bit strange. It's generally 12 months or 18 months. So I'm on the 12-month track, but I ended up quitting my job 3 months into mat leave and starting a new job, or accepting a new job. So I will start that in October, which will technically be 13 months after I went on maternity leave.
Okay, wait a minute. So you were on maternity leave and quit your job.
Yes.
And you were able to get another job while on maternity?
So the reason I quit my job was because I was approached about this new opportunity. I wouldn't have probably done it without something lined up.
Gotcha.
So I accepted this new job, asked if I could start in October, and then went back and quit my other job.
Got it. But they knew that you were going to be on maternity leave and it wasn't like...
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you still get paid when you're on maternity leave or is it reduced or?
Yeah. So it's government payments that come, it's a percentage of your salary and then there's a max salary.
Okay.
But then a lot of employers, which mine did for a certain period of time, will top you up to what your full salary normally would have been. So I think my top up was 18 weeks and then I was just on the maternity payments.
So, wow. They were going to give you your full salary for
Mm-hmm.
18 weeks.
Yes.
And that's typical?
I would say I think so. In my line of work,
Uh-huh.
yes. I guess I
Right.
don't know about everybody.
Sure. Okay. What kind of work do you do?
I'm a lawyer.
A lawyer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Wow. That is it's just very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And how is it perceived? Like, is it just like totally normally accepted that you have a baby and you're going to be out of work for a year and then you'll come back?
Yeah, I would say so. Again, it kind of depends on your position. I was an
Uh-huh.
associate lawyer, so it was really
Uh-huh.
typical for associates. Some would do 9 months instead of the full 12. Um, but for the most part, everyone does the full 12. Now, if
Right.
you're, entrepreneur or a
Uh-huh.
partner at a firm, it's a bit different
Sure.
because you're not an
Okay.
employee. So, it's a bit more complicated that way.
Sure. Sure. But what if someone said like I'm only going to take 3 months? Would that be crazy?
It would be shocking, I would
Okay.
say. Yeah.
Okay.
It's so short.
Yeah. Can you tell that to the United States government? Oh my God. Because most people, I mean, it's like 6 to 12 weeks of leave is what
Oh
people
my gosh.
get in the
I can't
US.
even.
And it's not, a lot of it might be unpaid, like completely unpaid. So
Oh my God. I can't imagine. Well, even having to be unpaid for 6 or 12 weeks, but also then having to try to go back to work. Physically, I
mhm.
don't even think you're
Yeah.
recovered, and
Yeah.
emotionally, certainly
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Wow.
yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So then as we wrap up, how do you feel about your whole birth experience?
Yeah, if you had asked me this 2 weeks ago, I would have said
Mm.
nothing but positive things.
Uh-huh.
Through therapy, I've been working through that there is actually a little bit of grief there for me because it
Sure.
went completely not to plan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my therapist has just hammered home that grief can coexist with the joy and gratitude that I have for what our birth experience was. So I am so happy with how it went and that it brought us our beautiful boy and everything was wonderful and our care team was wonderful. But I do still have a little bit of grief that I have to work through that I didn't have the vaginal birth I envisioned.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a beautiful way to put it, that grief and joy can coexist at the same time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, what then would be your one favorite piece of advice that you would give to someone who's pregnant now?
Yeah, I would just reiterate that one piece that I don't remember where it's from, but have preferences, but not a plan
Mm-hmm.
because it will certainly almost not go the way you think it will, but it
Right.
can still be really wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, my goodness, thank you so much for agreeing to share your story and for like me peppering you with all the questions
Of
about the
course.
Canadian system.
Yeah,
It's so
of course.
different than what we do here. I mean, it
Yeah.
just seems like there's more value placed on
Yeah.
mothers and
Mm-hmm.
family in general.
Yeah,
So than what we
absolutely.
have here. So
Yeah.
I just really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Like I said, I'm such a huge fan. This is such an honor to get to be here and chat with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.